And that looks like we are live with Rob J. Hayes. Bienvenidos, welcome, bienvenue. Come on in. We are talking with Rob J. Hayes today. Actually, Rob, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself? You probably do a much better job than I possibly could.
I doubt it. I'm an awful. We're terrible about talking. We're talking about ourselves. Anyway, I'll give it a go. Hi, I'm Rob J. Hayes. I'm indie fantasy and slightly science fiction-y type author. With I don't know how many books now. 18. I think I'm on 18 books, maybe 19. I don't know. Many books. And I released a new one a couple of days ago, a book 5 in the series. Look, I've got a prop. It's Death's Beating Heart. It's glorious. And then if I just move to the side slightly, there's the cover behind me as well. It's like I planned this. Yeah. Anyway, I also run a monthly blog where I list a bunch of upcoming self-published fantasy books. And that's about it, I think. I don't know. I used to be on a podcast, but that's gone now. So.
Right, all those things. You are missing a couple of things. We're looking at Spiffbo Winter.
Yeah. I won a Spiffbo one time.
Yeah, one time. One of the artists that Mark Lawrence calls one of self-publishing's rising stars.
I know that it sounds really good, that, doesn't it? I like to think it's actually it's come almost like George R. R. Martin's "This is fantasy the way it should be written." It's like, it's one of those really bland statements that sounds really impressive, but then you're like, but what does it mean?
What does it mean? It means he liked it. It was good. And one of my favorite quotes is Rob J. Hayes remains one of the best writers of grimdark fantasy around and should always be mentioned. With Erickson, Lawrence, Abercrombie, and Morgan, he's a master of making compelling and memorable characters that always capture your attention.
That's wonderful. I don't know who said it.
That's actually the good people at Good Book Nest that said that.
Oh,
in addition, among the 906 books that he's written so far include the First Earth Saga, It Takes a Thief, Mortal Techniques, War Eternal, and Titan Hoppers, just to name a few.
Yeah, that's a new. Oh, there you go. We were just mentioning a 6-book series. That's what Titan Hoppers is.
That's right. So
because Podium said, "How long is it going to be?" And I said, "I don't know, 6 books." And they went, "All right, here's a contract."
Here, there you go. Enjoy it. So we were just talking about this a little bit, and I think everybody would probably kind of enjoy your thoughts on this. So what's it like to release a book during the holidays?
It's manic. Don't do it ever. It's horrible. It's like one moment you're having Christmas, and the next moment it's like, oh yeah, I released a book. Shit. Yeah, no, it's been kind of crazy. I've never released it. I've released books at weird times of the year before because I just feel sometimes I feel like, we'll try it on this day. Like I've released a book on my birthday before. That was an interesting one. That was actually Where Loyalties Lie. Yeah, I think. Yeah, it was. It was Where Loyalties Lie, which is the one that won Spiffbo.
Right.
Nice sort of plug there.
Happy birthday to you.
Yeah. That was on May 26th of 2017, I think.
Nice.
Oh God. But yeah, no, that was also quite crazy because it's it's your birthday. You're supposed to be like taking it easy, and you're constantly checking your stats, going, how's it doing? But no, the holidays is a crazy time to do it because everybody is busy. So you're kind of like, well, I've got to, sort of like set up interviews to try and push the book and try and get people to read it early, and everybody's really busy, and you're trying to find time, but at the same time. The theory, I don't know how true this is that everybody gets Kindles or Amazon vouchers for their Christmas. So you release a book on Boxing Day, and everybody's like, well, I've got a Kindle to fill, or I've got £5 in gift vouchers. I'll buy some books, and you're like, yeah, buy mine.
Absolutely, buy all 5 of them while you're at it.
Well, yeah. That's the other thing. It's like put the first 4 books on sale because that way you can buy the first 4 for. What is it, £4 or whatever, $4, and then you get to the 5th book. You see.
That's right. And so, how does it feel for you to have Eska over the finish line?
It's insane. To be honest, I've been writing this series since 2016 now. it's been a 6-year project for me, and Eska's been there with me the entire time, and she's a bit of a force of personality. So to finally have her sort of be done and dusted is kind of crazy, because now I can free up that part of my brain space for something else as well. I can find a new character to latch onto, but I don't think she's ever going to leave me, to be honest.
It's not a terrible thing to have kicking around in your head for a while.
Yeah, sometimes she's quite abrasive at other times, though.
And you said that in one of in an interview previously, you had said that she at some point had kind of taken over. You had tried to write for her, and eventually she just kind of said, "No, we're going this way."
Yeah, there's kind of been a couple of times with that where I've sort of been writing, and then it started slowly getting harder and harder. It's like walking through water. It's just like, you're really struggling. And then at some point I sort of stepped back and took stock and realized she's not happy with the way the story's going. Which is really weird when that realization comes to you, that you're the one writing the book, but your character is not happy with it. It's bizarre. But yeah, no, it kind of happened with book 2. I wrote the entire of book 2, The Lessons Never Learned, and it was terrible. I sent it out to my alpha readers, and they all came back universally and went, this book's terrible. And I went, yeah, I know. So I had to scrap that entire thing and rewrite it. And a lot of it was because I tried to force it too much, and Eska kind of lost agency.
So this is one of the questions that I've got further down on the list, but since we're already here now, the brass cojones it takes to say, hey, you know what? I've written whatever, 120, 150,000 words, and it's wrong. And to say, you know what? Instead of forcing it, I'm going to go back and I am going to start over. How do you get that testicular fortitude to actually do that? Because that has to be like a piece of your soul you have to take out and go, no, not good enough, and toss it.
It was. I mean, I think I managed to save about 20,000 words out of the 120 that it was originally. But the problem was, I wrote the book. I knew it was terrible. My alpha readers told me it was terrible. And after hearing that, I basically put the entire project down for a while. So book 1 was written at this point. Book 2 was a mess. I put the entire project down and had a bit of an existential crisis. I was like, I'm a terrible writer. What am I going to do? Then I wrote Never Die, which kind of reawakened my love of writing, because it was just an absolute blast to write from beginning to end. And then after writing that, I thought, you know what, I feel like Eska's too strong a character for me to just give up on. So I thought I've got to give her the series that she deserves. So then it was just like, there's no way to fix book 2 the way that it was. So I just went, there's only one thing for it. Either I give up on Eska and the War Eternal and the entire series, or I just scrap book 2, save as much as I can, which, as I say, was about 20k, and then just start again. And it was a bloody tough choice to make, but I just felt like the character, she deserved the series that I wanted to give her, and the only way to do that was just be like, no, this book's terrible. Sometimes you write a stinker and you've just got to accept that.
Well, but I think it's a tribute to your character and your dedication to your craft that you wouldn't say, oh, well, it's better than good, it's done, and say, okay, let's go. And to say, you know what, the audience deserves better than this. Eska deserves better than this. I'll go back in, rip it all apart, and go again. I think is just a tribute to who you are as an artist. And I think it's amazing. I think a lot of people wouldn't do that.
I very nearly didn't as well. So I was never going to release the book in that state, but I was very nearly just gave up on the entire thing. So yeah, I mean, I know I'm not the only one. I actually I spoke to Bradley. No, not Bradley. Oh God, name.
Good old Bradley. He's great.
It's the wrong name though. He wrote Skullswarm, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head. and the Unhewn Throne trilogy. Oh my God, that's going to drive me insane. Anyway,
we'll get back to it later, folks.
Yeah, he did the same thing. He wrote he was telling us on Wizards, Warriors, and Words back when that was a thing, that he'd written a book which he sent to his agent, and then his agent came back to him. And this was supposed to be going to a traditional publisher, and his agent came back to him and just went, "This book, it's not good." It was like, yeah, I know. So he just scrapped the entire thing and started an entirely new project, apparently. Which I think that takes even more sort of guts in my mind, to just be like, I'm scrapping this entire project and just starting a new thing.
Yeah. So one of the things that always interests me about artists and authors is kind of where you started and where you came from. So who were you as a kid? Were you this bookworm that was in the closet all the time? Were you this kid with scraped knees running around and having adventures? Were you a gun for hire? Like, what were you before puberty?
I was the kid always staring out the window, not doing any homework, classwork, homework, anything. I was the guy that was just. I think my teachers always described me as a dreamer. Could really achieve something if he just applied himself. And I was far too busy. Yeah, I was far too busy just staring out the window, going, "But why would I care about this classwork when there's a dragon out there?" Nobody else could see it, but there's a dragon outside. So yeah, I was that kid, basically the dreamer. And I definitely always had my head in a book ever since. I was ill quite a lot in my earliest years. I had like wheezy bronchitis as a 1-year-old, and then I was always ill up until I was about 8 years old or something like that. And my mum used to go to the library and get books out for me. And I think one time she brought me The Dark Portal by Robin Jarvis, which is like a fantasy series about mice. And I absolutely fell in love with it. It's the first fantasy book I remember reading. She read me the first book, and then I read the other two myself, and I just absolutely loved them. And I think that was like the reawakening, or the awakening of, this is fantasy. Wow.
So your mom reading Dark Portal to you. I mean, this is Robert Jarvis coming to life through your mom. How old are you for that?
I don't know. I think I must have been about 5 years old, maybe 6. I was very young. I know that much.
So just magical. I mean, genuinely magical at that point.
Yeah. Between that and like my dad, who he sort of like, he was working full time, and every now and again he'd go to Blockbuster and bring back a film like Willow. And we'd have Willow for a week, and I'd watch it like, I don't know how many times, 20 odd times. As a kid, you can watch the same film over and over again in a day, can't you, when you're that age?
Mad Mardigan.
Exactly. So between my mother sort of like, reading to me, get me fantasy books, and my dad just like, hey, here's like Willow or Labyrinth or Dark Crystal, or the like. It really helped to spark my imagination in the form of sort of like, yes, fantasy. Yeah. This is the thing.
Well, and Dark Portal was kind of the beginning. Do you want to talk a little bit about your relationship with the book Orion by Megan Fury?
You've done your research, sir. Yes. When I was a teenager, I don't know, I must have been 13, 14. My dad, somebody bought Orion for my dad by Megan Fury, and he was never really into fantasy that much, but I picked it up and thought, I'll give this a read. And I mean, it was probably a bit too old for me, that book, at the time. I was 13, and there's some pretty dark things happening in that series, but I absolutely loved it. And it was the first book that made me not just say, I love fantasy, I love dreaming and everything, but I want to give writing a go. I'd written the odd short story here or there, but that was the first time I was like, I really want to give writing a book a go. So I was like, I don't know, 15 or so by the time I actually sat down and went, I'm going to write something, and it was terrible. so then I decided after that, I was like, this is terrible. I should probably write something that I don't have to create so much for. I didn't really think about it like that, but I think that was sort of the general premise. So then I started writing some fan fiction. And I wrote some Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Star Wars fan fiction because, teenager. And they were awful too, but hey. Yeah, it just sort of bloomed up from there. I never stopped writing short stories or longer stories or whatever.
And so you wanted to tell stories roughly from around the time of that book, which was maybe 13?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay. So how long was it between then and what was your first publication? 2013 with The Heresy Within?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So was that like 10 years of kind of building your chops, or was it less than that?
Much longer. So what year was it? So yeah, that would be.
I'm assuming that you're 28. So.
No, I'm. Oh no, I'm 39, mate. I'm like 40 next year.
All right, finally at the halfway mark. You get a half time.
I'm an old man. Yeah. So yeah, I was maybe 13 when that happened, and then I published my first book in 2013. How old was I in 2013? Fuck, I don't know. 9 years ago. 30. There we
30.
go. 30. So yeah, there's maybe 17 years of writing crap here and there. Not quite that, because obviously book, you don't just like go, hey, book released out of nowhere. You have to actually write it first.
And before we get too far down the pipe, we've got a prize for Sudhir Samir.
Brian Stavely. You nailed it. Thank you, Sudhir.
Sudhir, you get the official no prize of the day. Thank you very much. And thanks to Stan Lee for making up the no prize.
It was my mind going blank of like, oh God. But it was like, which one is it? Peter v. Brett? No, that's not it. Bradley P. Billio? No, that's not it. No, yes, Brian Stavely is the one. So there's too many B's.
So we've got this 13-year-old, and he's kind of working on telling stories and saying, oh, this is kind of who I want to be. And you've got a path, you've got a direction, but they don't have a job description for author. And it turns out nobody hires you for that without actually, writing a book that might actually be worth reading. So I want to go from there to the island of Fiji.
Yeah.
What the hell happened to you on the island of Fiji?
Oh, we don't talk about that.
Oh, all right. We'll just move
on. Yeah. So after I finished university, I studied zoology in university with the idea of going into animal behavior. And I figured a way to do that was to get myself on some research expeditions. So I did. I got myself on a marine research expedition, spent 3 months in Fiji, diving every day and mapping coral reefs, and it was lovely. And while I was there, I took this little leather-bound journal with me, with the idea of I would write in it every day, not like stories. I'd write a journal in it every day. But I figured my life is boring. There's more exciting things to write. So I started. Yeah, exactly. No, I started writing stories in it because I've always loved stories. And the first one I wrote in it was a short story called The Sword of the North, which is one of the short stories set in First Earth. And it's actually published in the bound folio. There's like that's my little short story collection of 8, I think, something like that. Some of which I wrote on the island. And so yeah, I'd used this little leather bound journal to write a bunch of short stories, and then started writing a longer story in there as well, which was going to be called, or which is called, it is a full book. It's called A Knight's Duty, and then its second one was going to be called A Prince's Honor, and then the third one was A King's Right. Yeah, that was it. And that was going to be the first trilogy to be set in what became First Earth. So I started writing the first book in this leather-bound journal, and then I got home. And by the time I got home from Fiji, I just went, right, writing is what I want to do. This is going to be, this is my thing. So I got myself another temp job, working in another bank, because apparently for some reason all throughout my young adult life, banks would just hire me. I don't know why. It makes no sense, but
They
I
like
just applied to a bank and they went, yes, we'll hire you. And I'm like, I don't want to work here. I don't have the right attitude to work in a bank. I hate this place. But they still wanted me. So yeah, got myself another temp job. And then as soon as I got home from work every day, I just start writing. And I wrote an entire book and decided it was terrible, and then wrote a different series instead.
Well, and you had an interesting experience because right off the bat, you had some good success, and you thought, "Oh, I can make a living at that." And then you kind of shifted gears and said, "Oh, I'm going to do something that's a little bit lighter." And the response to that was like, "Meh." Is that generally true?
Yeah, pretty much. I kind of shot myself in the foot because I killed my own momentum. So my first trilogy that I fully wrote and released was The Ties That Bind, which, I mean, yeah, it's grimdark. I don't tend to like terming myself as grimdark because most of my stuff isn't, but that one probably does classify as grimdark. It's about witch hunters. There's a lot of people dying in there. There's blood, there's guts, there's sex, there's all of it. Yeah, so I actually released that entire trilogy on one day because I'd already written the entire thing. I had no idea what I was doing. It was like the beginning of the self-publishing gold rush, and I just thought, I'll just release the entire trilogy in a day and see what happens. Yeah, it did really well. Sold really well, and then I thought, you know what, I could write the next series in this world, or I could write a fun steampunk romancy heist novel. I'll do that. And that did not go down well with the fans that I had started building because funnily enough, yeah, people who read grimdark don't tend to want steampunky, heisty, romancy fun.
Well, that's my question, is that you have said that you get kind of put in the grimdark category, but at the same time, you don't really feel like that's necessarily what you're writing. Maybe Razor's Edge qualifies, but the next two books in the saga are not. I mean, they're more like epic fantasy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. To be honest, I wouldn't really class The War Eternal as grimdark. It's dark, but I certainly wouldn't say it's grimdark. I don't think there's a sort of pervasive, oh, the world is shit, everything's going to hell feeling about it or anything like that. So I don't classify myself as grimdark. I wrote, or I suppose I am still sort of writing in a grimdark world. First Earth would be classified as a grimdark world. I wouldn't say anything else of mine is grimdark. I write fantasy.
Yeah.
Sometimes the worlds are a bit grim and dark. Sometimes they're not.
Right. And I was interested in one of the things that came out of one of the readers was what may be the perfect description for Razor's Edge, which was Mistborn meets Prison Break as written by Mark Lawrence.
Yeah, I like that one. That's a good one. Yeah, I can see that. I can see those comparisons. Prison Break, because I mean, the first book is set in a prison, and the main sort of story around it is, Esker's trying to get out of prison. Mistborn, I think the Mistborn
underground prison.
It is
prison set in Thailand. Is a completely unique setting.
Not entirely. There are a few other books that do it. There's Faithless by Graham Austin King. That's another book that's set completely underground. I don't think it's a prison. It's more like a bit of a temple type thing, where it's all about sort of a temple dedicated to a forge god, blacksmithing and stuff. But yeah, that one's set entirely underground. It actually came out just before Along the Razor's Edge. I remember because I wrote Along the Razor's Edge, and then I wasn't going to be releasing it for a while, and then Graham released Faithless, and I was like, you son of a bitch, you had the same idea.
How dare you?
Exactly. And then there's The Fade by Chris Wooding. That's another one that's set entirely underground, but that's very different because it's like an alien planet, and the species that live on it are an entirely subterranean species, and the surface is like toxic, so nobody can go up there and stuff. But there must be others. I'm sure, like maybe some of the Drizzt books are sent entirely
You
underground
got
as
the
well.
Underdark, and you're working in the Underdark for a lot of it. But certainly,
Exactly.
the only prison story that's set underground.
As far as I'm aware, yes. Although I'll tell you what, I found this out the other day. There was, I think it was 2013, an author named Lindsay Buroker, she's a very big author. She wrote a book. I think it was called like along the Blade's Edge or something like that, and it's set in a prison. And I only found out the other day, and I was like, that's an incredibly similar title to my own, and it's set in a prison. Interesting.
It's an homage, really, is what it.
I think they're fairly different books overall, but it was like fairly similar title.
Well,
yeah.
With your work pace, I mean, I'm wrong. I know this before I even start, that I was trying to put them all together. And you've got 2013 Heresy Within, then you get 2 books with 2015, 3 books on 2016. I think 2017 had 1, 2020 had 3, 2021 another 2, 2022 another 2. How in the world are you keeping up this Stephen King pace?
2023 we have 3 books. Yes. No, 23. No, yes. This year we've had 3 books because there was Sins of the Mother, Death's Beating Heart, and Titanhoppers. 3 books this year.
Titanhoppers came out this year too. Okay, 3. So, dude, how? Explain yourself.
Well, in reality, I've been writing now for I've been writing for about 13 years now. So I'd been writing for 2 or 3 years before I released my first trilogy, and then I sort of like I was quite slow at that point. I'd maybe get a book done a year, maybe, but I've just sort of slowly picked up pace. Doing it full time helps, but I seem to sort of like be able to write 2 books in a year, basically. And then some years I'll release 1 book, some year I'll release 3, some years I'll release 2, and that seems to work for me. And it's quite a pace, but I'm trying to slow down, to be honest, because it's actually a bit more fun when you're taking your time. If you're not sort of like, oh God, I've only written a book and a half this year, I've got to write the other half of this book, or whatever.
What's wrong with me? Well, and earlier in 2022, I mean, you were talking about suffering from burnout. And the idea that, this may be too much. I may be going too fast. Can you talk with me about that? What did it feel like? How did you decide to deal with it? Because that's a serious thing. Oh, it's very difficult to turn out good stuff when you're like, wow, your brain is tapioca.
Yeah. It was basically, it all started around sort of COVID time. And I mean, COVID, hey, who didn't get fucked by COVID? So basically, like, when COVID hit and I released the first 3 books in the War Eternal, and then after I'd sort of released those, I went into a full-on writing sprint, and I didn't really stop until the end of last year. So from like halfway through 2020 to the end of 2021, I was just writing, producing shed loads. No, I haven't even released all the books. One of them is still with my agent at the moment. But it's not looking like it's finding a home, so I'll probably self-publish that at some point. But then I also wrote like Spirits of Vengeance and I don't know, other books. My brain's going blank. What book did I write when? Anyway, so towards the end of last year, I had this crazy idea, because I didn't realize that I was burning out, and I had this crazy idea that I can write 2 books at once. So in the morning, I would be writing Sins of the Mother, and then I'd have like an hour's break for lunch, and then in the afternoon I'd start writing Titanhoppers. And I just started pushing myself, and when I started it, I was like, well, I'll write 1,000 words on each, and then I was hitting that quite easily. So I was just like, well, I can write 2,000 words on each, and then I found out I could do that. So then I thought, let's go for 3,000 words for an each. And it got to the point where I realized I was writing like 6,000 odd words a day across 2 different books. And it was weird because it was doable because it was 2 different books for me because they were so different. And it was like, I'd be writing Sins of the Mother and I'd be feeling worn out. I'd have my lunch break and then I'd just jump into this new world, and it would be so refreshing that I'd feel like, oh, I'm fine. I can just keep going. And I'd write in Titan Hoppers for sort of like, however many words, 2,000-3,000 words. And then at some point towards the end of last year, I realized that it wasn't working for me, and I was starting to have some days you just have a bad day. And you're like, the words aren't flowing. It's not easy for me. It's getting harder and harder. And at some point towards the end of last year, I realized I was having more bad days than I was good days.
Okay. So what did you decide to do about it?
It wasn't really a decision so much as I had to take a break. I was having way too many bad days. It was impacting my personal life as well. My missus was just like, "You're very grouchy." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm sorry."
And that's one of the things that I wanted to ask is that 2013, it's just you, right? I can do whatever I want. I can stay up until 2:00 in the morning writing and playing video games and having a grand old time. I'll get up at 6, go to work, come back and do the same thing.
Yeah, I was young. I could do that.
But you got married this year.
I did.
Does that affect kind of how you work and how you align your responsibilities and your time?
Not at all. To be honest, I've been with my missus for 9 years now, I think. So we're pretty well settled. The whole marriage thing hasn't really changed anything apart from it's now weird when she gets a bit of post and to Vicky Hayes, and we're both looking at it like, hey, yeah, it's a bit weird now you've got my name. But like, realistically, nothing's changed because we're quite sort of settled by this point. As you get after a while with in a couple, you just get to the point where you know each other's rhythms. So that sort of thing hasn't really changed. But in general, the sort of like, it changes when you do you do have another half. Like when I first started writing, I had no other sort of like commitments. I'd come home from work, I would write for 4 or 5 hours, then I'd jump on the Xbox, play a couple of hours with my mates, shooting some people on, I don't know, whatever game we were playing at the time, go to sleep, wake up, do it all the same. Again, these days it is very different because it's like, no, I do my writing during the day. So when Mrs. gets home from work, we can spend some time together. Because funnily enough, that's kind of the point.
I know there's a reason I married you. It was something. I like you. That's right. That's what it is.
And then obviously having a dog as well. Actually, having a dog's great because it forces me to get out the house. Gets to sort of like 10:30 and she's just like sat there going, "Walk, come on, we're leaving.
Get off of the stupid box. Come with me."
Exactly, which is great. It's like forced pauses, forced breaks. Fine, I'll go outside and see the world. It's horrible.
Let's go pee on something. It'll be great. You'll have a great time.
Yeah. She's a beagle, so it's more sort of like standing around while she sniffs a leaf and then going, "Okay, you done? Okay, no, you want to sniff the next leaf? Okay,
this is a good leaf."
Yeah.
So I was kind of curious. You have had an ongoing relationship with Felix Ortiz for a while. Is that something where you guys have an actual relationship? Is it purely a work relationship?
Oh yeah, no, we're married.
Oh, that's so nice.
He's my second husband.
Oh, you'll do well in Utah.
No, I don't know. It was for Never Die, basically. I started working with Felix on Never Die. I saw his just one of his artworks, Musashi, I think it was, and it was this sort of like, it was this glorious piece, which is, or it almost looks like it's watercolored painted, with like lovely brush strokes and everything. And I just saw that and thought, this is the guy that I want to do my Asian inspired novel. So I basically hired him, and then I just love working with him. He's such a joy to work with. So I just keep hiring him because I just sort of, I sit there and go, okay, here's a character, or here's a sort of scene, and he'll come back with something better than was in my head, because he's an artist.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, he knows art better than I do. So quite often he'll come back with something that isn't entirely what I thought I wanted, but is actually a hell of a lot better.
Yeah. Isn't that grand?
Yeah, and it's really easy. It's got to the point where I could just like words, and he'll be like, yes, I can turn this into something.
I got you, Rob. Don't worry about
exactly.
I can do that without your bad sketches. I'm okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I occasionally send him little like stick figure sketches. I did that for Pawn's Gambit. Actually, I sent him this little stick figure sketch, and he came back and went, "I know what you want. It's not going to work."
And to which you say, "Thank you."
Pretty much, it was like, yeah, no, fair play. What do you want to do then? It's just like, all right, tell me about the characters. Okay, here's the characters. I've got you. Okay.
And the other one that I wanted to ask you about was your relationship with John Gerald. What does that look like? How does that working relationship function for you?
Yeah, working with John's great. I mean, I approached him in 2019, I think it was, with an epic fantasy that I'd written called Herald, which still hasn't been published, but might be next year. Who knows? Anyway, and he sort of read it and went, "This is fantastic." So he took me on as a client. We haven't had anything traditionally published yet, but he does a lot of work with sort of translation rights and the like. So through him, I've got Never Die, and Pawn's Gambit will soon be published in Brazilian, or Portuguese in Brazil.
Nice.
Yes, which is quite nice. And there's a couple of other translation things on the cards as well. And then he's also works with Podium as well for me, which is great because I just like it. It's lovely having an agent. You get to just be like, look, you do all the legwork. I'll just do the writing thing. You go and talk to the publishers and do all the negotiating and all of that lot, and I'll just write some more words.
Well, and you've talked about, self-pub versus trad. Obviously, you have done a ridiculous amount to help and assist in the self-pub community. You've said before that you might be interested in hybrid at some point. And my question for you is, I'm Rob J. Hayes. I've got, let's call it 18 books because neither one of us have a complete total. What is it that traditional publishing can even offer you at this point? You have an audience, you have a body of work. What's the draw for you for trad at this point?
I think there's a few things. I think that there's always going to be an audience that you will never be able to reach as a self-published author. At least the way that the market is at the moment. Who knows where it might be in the future, because it's just so wildly different from where it was 10 years ago. But there will, in its current sort of like form, there will always be people who will not read self-published books. They just won't. Or there is still so many people who they will not go on Amazon or whatever to get their books. They go to bookstores. And as an indie author, it is so hard to get into bookstores. It's not even funny. So there's always going to be a sort of an audience that you're never going to reach that way. There's also another sort of factor to take into account, which is most of the big sort of awards and that sort of thing, the books they select will not come from the self-published pool. They will only select from traditionally published titles and the like. So in that sort of sense, there's a level of legitimacy which you're just not going to get as a self-published author. But on the flip side of it, you're probably going to make more money as a self-published author. You probably are, because traditionally published authors don't tend to get paid much unless you're one of the big boys or girls. So yeah, there are benefits to both forms of publishing, basically. So the way I figure it is, it might be worth getting a book traditionally published if there is a publisher that wants one of my books eventually. for the simple fact of broadening my audience, and lending me a level of legitimacy, that it's not true legitimacy, because being a self-published author is no different to being a traditionally published author in the terms of quality that you can produce, but there is a perceived legitimacy, which you're just not going to get.
Different.
Exactly.
No.
So that's basically it. It's just a sort of playing all the fields. But I certainly don't intend to stop self-publishing, because I do pretty well at it.
So speaking of, I mean, you've got Eska over the finish line. You've got a pile of books that you've already got under your belt. Would you like to tell us a little bit about Seven Swords or Age of the
God-Eater? Right, Seven Swords is the next Mortal Techniques book, and there's about 10,000 words written on it so far, but I had to put it on the shelf for a while because I got contracted to write the Titanhoppers books, Podium. So I've been concentrating on those and getting Eska finished. But yes, there is a fourth Mortal Techniques book coming at some point, and it's going to be called Seven Swords. And yeah, that one's going to be quite fun. And Age of the God-Eater, the first book of which is Herald, will hopefully be released in 2024.
Okay, so this is Herald.
This is Herald.
Okay.
Yes, I'm at this point. I'm probably going to be self-publishing it, but okay. So I used to work in a way where I would write an entire trilogy before I published the first book. It's how I did it with Ties That Bind, and how I did it with the first three War Eternal books as well. And as I sort of cleared as I was publishing slightly faster than I was writing, I cleared the backlog of books, so I could no longer do that. I got to the point where I was having to release, if I wanted to keep releasing a book a year, I was having to release books as I sort of finished them, and I don't like doing it that way. I much prefer writing a trilogy, and then I may not release the trilogy all in one day like I did with Ties That Bind, or a month apart like with War Eternal, but just having the entire trilogy written before I release book one allows me to do things slightly differently. I can go back to book one and put in like foreshadow events in book three, or do other things. So I much prefer writing that way. So yeah, this whole little aside is because that's why the Age of the God-Eater books are probably going to be 2024, because my intention is to spend next year writing them. Book one's already written, but book two and three need writing. So that way they will all be finished, and then I can sort of release them on my own schedule, but without the hecticness of just being like, okay, book one's out. Oh God, I've got to write book two.
Well, and we've got some people that are very excited about the next Mortal Techniques book, so I think that'll tide them over until Herald comes out.
Absolutely. Hopefully Seven Swords will be next year, but I'm not. I can't guarantee it, because I have to finish writing it first. As I say, it's only about 10K so far.
Yeah, I mean, so far you've released a book on your birthday. You've released a book on Boxing Day. I mean, really, what's next for you? There are no mountains left to climb.
I don't know. I mean, I could go with one of the American holidays. Independence Day, that's a thing.
Sure, July 4th, summer release.
I mean, it might be a little bit weird being English.
We'll do it on Guy Fawkes Day. It'll be great.
Yeah. I don't know. I think I'll stay away from doing them on holidays, either real holidays or my holidays. I don't know. Maybe the King's birthday. We have a king nowadays, so King's birthday. I'll release a book.
We'll have a king for a whopping 10 years, and then we'll switch over to somebody else. So I like doing a thing where we do a speed round of questions at the end. Are you willing to do a speed round for 2 minutes?
Absolutely. Does that mean I have to not turn every question into an essay? I just have to answer it quick.
It's entirely up to you. So we are going to do 2 minutes with Rob J. Hayes, starting right about now. All right. The zombie apocalypse is coming. Your family is safe. Who are the 3 people you want on your team?
Okay, my family's safe, so it's just anybody else.
Anybody you want.
Can they be real or fictional?
Real
Fictional?
or fictional?
Real or fictional? Tell you what, let's go with John Wick. I think he'd be pretty handy in a zombie apocalypse. Who else? We'll go for a real person. Let's have Arnie from the 80s.
Guys, okay. And number three?
Number three, no, Samwise. We'll have Samwise.
Oh, you're the only guy that's ever picked moral support. I love you. All right. So, what is the worst job you have ever had?
Banker. All of them. Every banker role I've ever done. Screw you, banks.
Who was your childhood actor or actress crush?
What sort of childhood? We'll go Sarah Michelle Gellar. I absolutely loved Buffy.
You're not wrong. If you could describe one perfect reader for Eska, who would that be?
Probably a teen goth who really hates the world.
If you had to eat one meal every day for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Croissants.
Oh, what kind of croissants? Just basic croissants or something with almonds in it?
I'd take Pain de Chocolat. I like the ones with chocolate. I'm not the biggest fan of the almond ones myself.
Nice. Who's your favorite cartoon character?
Optimus Prime.
Your favorite guilty pleasure?
I don't know. What's guilty pleasure? Trying to think of one. Probably watching old sitcoms that are really awful and their jokes date really badly.
That sounds
Have you
perfect.
ever tried watching Friends? Oh my God, I like watching Friends. It's like comfort, but dear God, there are way too many gay jokes. You hear half the jokes and you're like, oh, how is this ever funny?
Oh, and we are out of time. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Have a good one.
Thank you.